How's it going, everybody? AJ here at the Negative Supply headquarters, and today we wanted to make a quick video showing you how quickly and easily you can scan your 35mm film with our basic film carrier 35. The goal of this video demonstration is to show you how quickly, easily, and affordably you can scan your 35mm film with just about any digital camera and a wide range of different macro lenses. Most people assume you need to have the latest and greatest digital camera, and if you're one of those users at home that already has the latest, newest full-frame mirrorless digital camera from Sony or Nikon or Canon, that's great, but if you aren't, no need to worry. Most of the sample scans on our website were done, or made I should say, with a used Canon Digital Rebel T3i. Relatively speaking, that's an ancient digital camera, but we got great results out of it. Now we've upgraded, but only marginally. I'm using, for most of my scanning, at least for 35 and 120 film, I'm using a Canon EOS 77D with a 60mm macro lens. That entire setup used is around $500 to $600 US. The digital camera and macro lens that I'm using today would be one of the low to mid-range options I would recommend to someone scanning film with a digital camera. But if you'll take a look at the chart that we're about to put on the screen, we're going to give you a range of options at different price points that will help you make amazing scans. There's a few different pieces of equipment you're going to need besides a macro lens and a digital camera to scan your film. That's going to be either a copy stand or a basic tripod that you might already have at home. In this case, I'm using our basic Riser Mark I. It's going to be a light source to actually backlight your film when you're scanning, or you could use something like an iPad with a white screen on and the brightness all the way up. But for our purposes today, we're using our 4x5" light source basic. And then you're going to need a roll film carrier to hold your film flat. Our basic film carrier 35 works great with cut strips or uncut full-length rolls of 35mm film. Before we do a scanning demo with our basic film carrier 35 and the other tools here on the set, I wanted to share a few options with you all about software for converting your negatives. We've extensively used a few different options that have been on the market for some time, but the two we use most here at Negative Supply are Negative Lab Pro and Film Lab Desktop. Both of them work really well. They have a few different features and benefits. Film Lab Desktop is pretty great and something I use a lot when I'm in a hurry because it's pretty simple. You're going to get a nice standard cut and dry scan, a good conversion, a very good workable file that you can have either as a JPEG or a TIFF. Negative Lab Pro does give you quite a bit more back-end control. There's quite a lot more under the hood that you can kind of sort through and work with. It can be a little overwhelming right when you're starting, in my experience, but if you're used to scanning your own film, you might find all of those options to be more rewarding. Another question I get asked all the time is, should I tether or should I not? What are the benefits? And if I should tether, what are the software options? And for me, this is actually a big reason why I use this Canon EOS 77D and have historically used several different Canon cameras for scanning because I prefer to tether, and Canon has free software that works with every Canon camera I've owned, and it's called Canon EOS Utility, that allows you to tether your scans straight onto a folder on your desktop and then open those in Negative Lab Pro or open them with Film Lab Desktop, etc. Alternatively, instead of Canon EOS Utility, there are other softwares you can use. Capture One and Lightroom both have certain tethering support depending on your camera make and model. So if you're interested in learning more about that to see if your camera does have that capability, just Google that online, or if you need some help figuring it out, feel free to reach out, send us a message, write us in the comments, and we'll help you. 3 different benefits come to mind when I think of why I like to tether when scanning my film with a digital camera. One of them is having an instantaneous preview on a much larger monitor than the screen on the back of my camera. Another is being able to very quickly transfer files and have them populate onto the computer. And third, and most important for me, is being able to totally eliminate shake when I'm actually capturing my scan, because I can do so remotely when tethering. If you prefer not to tether, or if your camera isn't capable of tethering, It's as simple as just putting a memory card in your digital camera, capturing the scans, and then putting that memory card into your computer and making the conversions. It's not that much more work. Now I want to demonstrate just how quick and easy it is to scan a full-length roll of 35mm film with our basic kit that we have here. This roll of film is Ilford Ortho 80 Plus. We're actually going to be converting these scans with FilmLab Desktop, and we are going to be tethering with Canon EOS Utility. We'll show some of those steps here in just a moment. But once you take your roll of film out of the sleeve, just feed it into the side of your basic film carrier 35, and slide the film through until you arrive at your first frame. Check and make sure everything looks good. In this case, I'm going to check on the computer monitor and on the back of the camera. And I'm going to capture my scan. Just a moment ago, right before I started this demo, I did make sure everything was in focus. And that's something you want to do right before each scanning session. Just make sure everything looks good. You don't have to refocus between each frame. Once you focused on the grain on your first frame of the roll, it should maintain that same point of focus through the whole roll of film. Now that we've gone through our film scanning demo using our basic film carrier 35, the rest of our basic scanning kit, and Canon EOS Utility, I'm going to show you how I quickly and easily convert my scans using FilmLab Desktop. First things first, I'm going to locate the folder on my desktop. I just called this one Basic Demo Call number 2. And I'm going to open FilmLab Desktop app. And once the program's open, I'm going to go to the top left and I'm going to select the folder icon. I'm going to find that cold folder of negatives on my desktop, and I'm going to open that. Great, so it's loading those files in now. I selected 16 files from an initial roll of, I guess it was about 38 frames. Got a couple extra frames on that roll of film. So once I have the program open, I'm going to go to the Process tab to the top right. And I'm going to click that drop-down menu and select Variable Contrast Black and White Negative, since we're scanning black and white negative film. Great, so it's going to immediately tell the software, okay, we're scanning black and white film, and it's going to give you quick preview conversions of all the scans now when you cycle through those images. So I have a few different controls in here. I can flip this image right side up, and really once I get my orientation squared away, I'm just looking at these few sliders on the right-hand side. So for black and white, we're looking at exposure time, contrast, and brightness primarily. So usually I'll just play around with these a bit until I find what I like the most, and I also try to think back to that scene. What were the tones like? What was that moment like? And try and get it as close as I can. Of course, one thing you can always do is you can take these scans, these conversions as they are, and take them into Lightroom or Photoshop later and do some more fine tuning if you need to. But once I've made a few quick conversions, I'm going to click this pointing down arrow on the right side. That's actually to save that converted scan to the same folder you pulled from, or you can specify a different output folder. In this case, I just have the output the same as the input folder. Great, yeah, this is actually a portrait of Tim Ryugo when he visited the Negative Supply office. This was when we were still at our old building across the street here. This one's pretty tricky. Shooting ISO 80 film indoors. I was using a really fast lens, and it was a backlit scene, so this would be an interesting take on how well the dynamic range of a relative entry-level digital camera and the file handling from FilmLab Desktop, how well it can handle the really dynamic scene like this photograph would give you. Great. We'll save that and keep moving on. So a few of these won't need much adjustment once I've kind of dialed in the roll. Certainly if there are frames that were done in like the same lighting conditions. So like these next few were all shot a few minutes apart from each other, really with the same window light. So most of these will probably be the same. I'm gonna save that and move on. And another thing, you might watch other videos on YouTube of people who really fly through this process and others who really want to dive in and take their time. And the best thing to keep in mind is that there's really no right or wrong answer to this. You dictate your workflow. So if you want the most fine-tuned, detail-oriented conversion, you want to remove every single speck of dust at 400% in Photoshop, you do it. If that's what you want to do, go for it. But if you just want a quick and dirty conversion that you can throw on Instagram or Facebook and at a moment's notice, you're not worried about the dust, you're not worried about whether or not if it's perfect, that's fine too. For me, when I'm scanning roll film, I'm usually somewhere in the middle. If it's a file I decide I really want to work with and maybe print, then I'll go back and remove dust at least 100%, maybe 200%, and take a really good look at that photo. Whether this is your first time scanning 35mm film or you've been scanning film for years with a range of different options, I hope what you take away from this video today is that scanning film with negative supply tools, scanning with our basic film carrier 35 and other products, is a way to revolutionize the way you work, to help you save time, save money, and hopefully spend more time making photos as opposed to scanning them. Thanks so much for tuning in.